friends. So, in a recent video about complaining, I mentioned that sometimes as humans we will put up these barriers of protection against being hurt, especially after we have already been through something painful and traumatic. While that is not a bad thing in and of itself, I want to elaborate on that point a little bit because sometimes we do that a little too effectively, and it stops us from not only keeping out pain, it stops us from fully experiencing good things in our lives too. Keeping out the good is always an unintended consequence, of course. Nobody wants to keep out things like new opportunities or fulfilling personal growth or wonderful new friendships or relationships. But we do it anyway. And when we do, it is always in hindsight that we realize that was a terrible strategy. And as if on cue, here comes this regret that inevitably comes with all of those things as well. You would think that after we do that, after we reject something good out of fear, which is, the motivating factor, that we would learn from that we would not make that mistake again over and over until the very thing we were trying to avoid with this action becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Sadly, no. Most people will see that self-fulfilling prophecy as a validation to keep feeling that way for a bit longer. See, I knew it. I got passed over again. I got left or dumped again. I got screwed over again, is what we focus on, leaving the reason that it actually happened, yet again, largely untouched. Why? Because figuring out that reason requires work, and it's all internal. Most people are not super excited to do that, and honestly, I don't blame them. Working on yourself is one of the hardest projects you will ever take on. It requires digging deep to find answers to questions that are not fun or pleasant. The thing is, though, that eventually you do have to find those reasons. You have to get an answer to the question of why does this keep happening to me? I mean, I guess you don't really have to, but you're going to be a lot happier and more fulfilled when you do. So you've got a real Sophie's choice there. Young people may need to Google that one. Anyway, look, putting up barriers or walls after a betrayal or a disappointment or a heartbreak is perfectly normal. Most of us do this. Or we develop trust issues, which we are going to cover in a different video very soon. In the process of putting up those walls, we often make promises to ourselves to raise our standards or be more careful at taking people at their word or be less trusting or what have you. Those things are normal too, and honestly, they aren't bad things either. While we like to think that people's word is bond these days, it isn't always. Proceeding with caution, especially in close interpersonal relationships where you don't know that person very well, is, smart. You wouldn't meet someone, say, at a bar, date them for 3 months, and then hand them the keys and title to your very expensive and paid-off luxury car, would you? God, I hope the answer is no. Anyway, the reason that the answer should realistically be no is because we don't know what we don't know about them yet, right? So you have a 50-50 chance that you'll wake up one morning and the car will be there or not. When someone is trustworthy and real, they have no problem with proving that to you most of the time. They have no problem with earning your trust, so to speak. It's only when the person's intentions are less than good that this is an issue. The person who was planning on pulling one over on you is always going to be the most upset when you head them off at the pass and foil their plans. People always tell on themselves if you give them enough time. It's almost as sure of a thing as death and taxes. So all of this is to say, having caution with others in any kind of interpersonal relationship is not just smart, but it's necessary. But how much caution is too much caution? How much do you secure the bricks of those walls that you have built? And how much do you push one out to give a little peek at what's behind that wall? Now, there's something I want to say about this, building walls, I mean. When you put them up as self-preservation, you inevitably hear people say things like, well, when somebody cares enough about you, they will keep trying to bust that wall down. While I think that's true to an extent, I think that's a little bit of an unrealistic answer. I mean, look, some relationships, whether they be friendships or anything else, take more effort than others. That's just how things go. It can take more effort to get someone to trust you or know that you're genuine based on their past experiences and their unresolved traumas and many, many other factors which we probably couldn't name in just one video here. But sometimes even when we make extraordinary efforts with those people, and we really, really try, they don't move a single brick from those walls at all. And there does unfortunately come a time when you have a watershed moment where you have to decide, do I want to continue fighting what seems like an all uphill battle, or do I give up? First, let me say this. My parents did not raise a quitter, so you will not hear me advocate for quitting very often. But there are times and situations, friends, where that is actually the best choice, because there are plenty of times where you will try your best for a very long time, and it will still feel like you have not made much, if any, progress. Trying to emotionally move people who don't want to be moved is actually a perfect example of this, and it's one of the most frustrating, too. Continuing to try in many of these cases is only going to negatively affect your own mental health. So, as harsh as this may sound, the choice can very easily become, who do I want to quit on here? This person that I really, really want to reach, or myself, by continuing to make myself crazy, by trying to help them or figure them out, or whatever it is you're trying to do with them. Listen, I might encourage people to quit on lost causes sometimes because that's what's best for them, but I would never, ever encourage anyone to quit on themselves. So I think you know what the right choice is here. At the end of the day, people are always going to do what they want to do. And you can spend years trapped in a cycle that zaps you of your well-being and your joy and your everything because you have spent every single ounce of mental energy on other people. And it leaves you with next to nothing for yourself. Friends, this kind of self-abandon doesn't serve anyone, least of all you. So, in the words of the immortal Kenny Rogers, sometimes you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And sometimes it's definitely time to fold them. So, remember how I said that people saying things like, if they really care, they will keep trying to bust that wall down when it comes to emotionally unavailable people is a bit unrealistic? That's why. Because all the trying in the world is not always going to get that person who is holding firmly to that wall to open up a door. It's not going to get them to address the giant elephant in the room that is keeping them company behind that wall either. And that is their unresolved trauma. That is the overarching reason that 99% of people build those walls in the first place. Now, look, you can try to help people process their trauma. You can listen to them. You can be there for them. You can be a consistent positive for them, which helps to build their trust. But at the end of the day, if they don't want to do the rest of that work, if they don't want to let go of the past enough to allow it not to hijack their future, there is nothing that you can really do about that. When we build walls, we think that they are only for keeping out what we don't want in our lives. But that's simply not true. When we put them up so firmly that we don't even allow a single opening anywhere, we definitely keep out more than just what we don't want. We end up keeping out what we do want too. And that is such an exercise in self-defeat. It's so tiring to even think about. And I say this as someone who has, in the past, built up some big walls. Some of them took a long time to take down, even with people who proved they were worthy of it. Even with people who rented the bulldozer and showed up at the house to help me take it down, and then helped me pick up the bricks after. So I know firsthand that this is not easy to do at all. But it is worthwhile because, well, it makes you a ton happier, for starters. But it also keeps you from sliding into that perpetual victim mentality. And that is one of the most self-defeating, throw in the towel on yourself things you can ever do. It's very difficult to leave that space once you've been hanging out there a while too. Now, look, there are certainly people who like being there. Trust me on this one. It's so much easier for them to just blame everything on somebody else instead of look inward to figure out what the common denominator is in all of their problems. But I truly believe that most people don't actually want to be this way and would prefer to be able to have healthy relationships and friendships and any kind of connection without feeling like they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. They just want there to be no other shoe. But they can't let go of the past that keeps them in that expectation. They don't want to always do the work required to get there, and it is work. So that's their personal decision. They will need to come to that on their own, in their own time. It's unfortunate that a lot of folks don't get there until they have already alienated a lot of other people who had good intentions, but they were just not ready to receive them, to put it plainly. This is one of the biggest reasons why I advocate so much for handling your unresolved trauma on this channel. Because not only is it extremely heavy to carry all of that around, but it permeates into just about everything else that you do. Things that are in the past shape a lot of who we are and what we do in the future, whether we want it to or not. I mean, hell, sometimes we don't even realize that that's what's happening because, as I have said on this channel a bunch, trauma does change us. But friends, so does growth. So does processing the emotions that are associated with those traumas and not letting them dictate our actions. I mean, look, by all means, as human beings, we have to have some kind of guard up around us or we risk going off the rails, right? But it's so important to make sure that when we establish those guards, that we do not make them as draconian and all or nothing as we often do. Someone may have betrayed you, but that does not mean that everyone will. Someone may have abandoned you, but that does not mean that everyone will. Someone may have been a thief or a fake friend or a liar or a fraud, but that doesn't mean that everyone is going to be any or all of those things. Even with the firmest walls in place, friends, you still have to let a little light in, even if it's just 1 inch at a time. Otherwise, you're just going to sit in the darkness alone. And I don't think anyone really wants that for themselves. There's nothing wrong with putting up walls for protection. But when someone is trying to shine a light through between those bricks, give them a chance. Give them the benefit of the doubt until they give you a reason not to. Don't let terrible people from the past stop you from making amazing connections in the present or in the future. There are still plenty of good partners, good friends, good people, period, out there. But you'll never get to meet them if you stay in that darkness. Human connections are beautiful things that can last you a lifetime, but they're called connections because they require a linking or a bond. And you can't do that through bricks and stone. You need something softer and more malleable. In here is a good start. That's all I've got for you this week. I will be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.